Call to order the meeting of the Personnel Committee for Tuesday, August 28th. Roll call, Madam Secretary. Everyone's present except for Mr. Joseph, Mr. Turner. I believe they're both on the way. If you would, please rise for the invocation and pledge. Mr. Ken Dawson will lead us in the invocation and the pledge.
Let's pray. Father, we thank you that your word says your grace is sufficient, and your grace is sufficient in all things. For the things you do for us, for the protection of our family, for our health and our strength, we give you praise, and we thank you for that. We also thank you that your grace is sufficient for us doing the people's business and making decisions that would affect them in a positive way. You said if anyone asked for wisdom, that to ask of you, that you would give to every man freely. So tonight we ask for your wisdom and guidance as we perform these duties tonight. We thank you for all things you continue to do, for blessing us in your parish. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ken. Moving on to item number 3, discussion of human resources projects. Ms. Toledo.
Good afternoon.
Good
Good afternoon.
All right. So one of the things that we wanted to do is just to make sure that the council understood some of the projects that HR was currently undertaking. When I was hired, we knew that there was a mountain of work to be completed in human resources in order to provide a good standard of services for the employees and for those candidates that were interested in working with Ascension Parish. So the HR projects that I do have to present to you are, some of them are ongoing, some of them are annual. So we'll just go through those annual projects so that you can see some of the workload that's outside of our daily tasks. So compliance. We have a lot of compliance that we do on a daily term, but the ACA is one of those things that we're required to do. It not only comes from the insurance company, but the employer is also required to prepare ACA notices. And those notices, we begin to prepare them in February so that they can be sent out in March. And it takes a lot of communication with our finance team, with the insurance company, just to make sure that we're not giving out incorrect data. Prior to me coming, the team has actually been very successful in doing so, not only preparing on their own and using third-party services for that project, but it is a group project. We do have a benefits manager who's part-time and now a benefits administrator who does prepare that, but the notices have to be sent out via mail according to federal law. So there's a lot of teamwork in packaging those programs and making sure the associates the employees have them in a timely fashion. Another thing with just general benefits is our health insurance acquisition. This is a large project only because it takes not only the human resources team, but also teams throughout the various departments. So we do get input from the employees, from the employee representatives, and from other leaders and what type of health care they're interested in, what were some of the challenges they had in the previous years, and what direction we want to go in. That process actually starts this month and will go into November, hopefully just October, but sometimes it goes into November in terms of the selection. And then, of course, we have open enrollment to prepare for. That starts rolling in August and ends in January for us. We plan throughout that time a health fair and biometric screening. Last year was something new and interesting. Before, we were simply doing biometric screenings. You come in, you see the nurse, and you leave. Now what we're trying to do is do more of an educational piece. So we invited in some health clubs, some healthy lifestyle companies, so that the employees could get more information on what they should be doing to better their lives, their family lives, and their health in general. And so we look forward to really expanding and perfecting that portion of our health fair itself, so that we can start to use some of the local services that we have in the area. And we have some great services. I think Horn of Plenty is one of those that we want to mention as a service, and a local company that would be able to provide a healthy lifestyle for our employees and their families. Okay. Other annual projects, especially since I've been here, I know my team is really excited about a lot of the developmental training that they have an opportunity to receive now. So we have HR trainings, we've had some in-house trainings, we've also had safety training. So our safety manager, our safety officer is now a certified occupational safety person. And so now he has that certification. One of the things we also want to do is to start a training for our HR review board. The new members haven't had an opportunity to really go through our personnel manual, and we do understand and we do see that there are some changes that need to be made with our personnel manual for clarity, if not anything else, just for clarity. But the questions that they have really go toward the intent of the document. And so just taking them through some of those items and showing them how we view it and how we apply it would be very helpful to the HR review board, so that they understand some of the cases that we bring forth. And they can also ask questions that are relevant to those particular cases as well. As you may know, ethics training is an annual training through the state. This year they also wanted us to do sexual harassment training, and that actually started this year. So we'll be going through a process with a company called Knowledge City to make sure that our employees have access to it. It's a web-based system. They get credit for taking that particular training, and that'll be available. I believe the system is currently being set up right now, so it'll be available to them next month. Another annual project is our employee and candidate relations. We're really digging deep and trying to find new advanced recruitment techniques. Previously, it was, I need an employee, let's post a position, and depending on the type of position it is, it may hit the newspaper, otherwise it's just simply in government buildings. Now we're hitting the internet harder. We're going to some of the local campuses. We're looking into job fairs to put us out as one of the premier employers in the area, and I do believe that we are. We offer great benefits, promotional opportunities for those candidates that are interested, and we have such a growing parish that we see a lot more talent coming in, and we want to be able to attract them. So the more that we put Ascension Parish out as an employer, the more people that we'll attract with better skills and credentials. And so we're looking at that periodically to see what are the aspects that we're missing out on, what are some of the federal requirements that we kind of feel as though we can improve upon, such as reaching out to groups with disabilities, to our veterans groups. We want to know that we're doing our best to make sure that we're out there and that we're visible. Okay? Now for special projects are those projects that I came in and I noticed that we needed a lot of work on. Records retention, we're still working on that. I actually had someone to come into office and pull a lot of the records, make sure that we're keeping those 100-year records that the state says that we have to have, and working with the state departments to make sure those records that need to be destroyed, that we can identify them and pull them and set them aside for destruction. That process started in October. It seems that it will take possibly another year to complete without additional assistance. And this is a fun one, compensation study. The compensation study that we did was in 2016. The requirement from the council is that every 3 years, a new compensation study is completed. 2019 is that year. So we're looking at opportunities to on how we should approach that particular project, what level of compensation study that we need, especially since you just recently approved the final implementation of this study that was completed in 2016 this year. So what additional aspects do we need to look at? Are there particular roles or particular groups that we need to focus more on? And so that's one of the special projects that we definitely have under our belt. Employment eligibility verification. It's a funny term. It doesn't always mean what you think it means, but there are some issues where we need to correct them. We do need someone in the office that can focus directly on our verification program. This is something that can be corrected, that it has no choice but to be corrected, but we also need support in staffing to make sure that this particular project is done, the deliverable is there, and that we can maintain it from that point on. A lot of this was in development prior to me coming, prior to a lot of my staff members being there, so there's a lot of issues that kind of start, a couple of years ago, but they're not something that we cannot fix. So we need to really give some attention to our verification program and make sure that we're in compliance with all of the federal laws. Safety. Safety has popped up a couple of times on our radar in the last few months. And this is more of a grander picture, not necessarily when we're talking about training. We're talking about the risk management of the parish. How do we respond to our employees in terms of the needs that they have? How do we train them? How do we review our buildings and any assets that we have? And how do we measure our performance when it comes to our risk management? So there's many opportunities, many ways to discuss it, many ways to present it. It's something that we'll work closely with President Matassa to understand what direction that he wants to go in. But it's definitely something that I think, once we get a great handle on, the issues that we have with safety trainings and general safety management of our personnel, I think it will help us identify and focus on those particular issues so that we can attack them directly. And of course, we're still working on our safety manual. I think once we get someone in that can give us more direction, that has experience, and I know we have a lot of local candidates that has that experience, especially with the industries that are in the area that can give us some guidance so that we can present to President Matassa as well. Okay. The ERP is our next big project. It starts in October. It will take away my entire department because it will affect my entire department, affect the way we do operations, affect also our ability to service on a daily basis some of our employees. And so we're looking at various ways to make sure that those services don't decline as much as we anticipate. So we do need some support in that, and that'll be October through March. We're looking at going live sometime second quarter of 2019. So it's a lot of work, especially since we're a paper-driven department. We don't have a lot of details collected, so it'll be a lot of data collection, which will cause all of our employees in human resources to really come together and work as a team. Special projects are also employee and candidate relations, our job descriptions. We're still working on that, especially with the new titles that were recently approved. We do have some of those job descriptions that we just want to make sure that we are describing accurately and making sure that those credentials that are required are actually necessary for those particular positions. Performance management, succession planning, I always see those working hand in hand. We can move our employees forward through coaching and counseling with performance management, but how do we plan for replacing this workforce that is quickly retiring? A large percentage of our employees are retiring, so we need to look at our current staff, how they work, how they are able to improve their skills so that they can become the next supervisors and lead those departments. And then we're working with the personnel manual. That is something that our office has taken seriously. We have completed our personnel manual committee, so we are in the at the point of editing the document so that we can present it to President Matassa. Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Joseph?
Yeah. On that personnel manual,
Yes, sir.
I know I'm on that committee. And,
Yes, sir.
You gonna bring that to us to review it after administration review it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I mean. All right. Question for now.
Anyone else?
No,
Mr. Eric?
yes, please, thank you. You have to forgive me, I have a frog in my throat today. So, you spoke about the succession planning. Tell me how many people we are looking at in our workforce who are at retirement age and who you feel like in the next 2 years will be retiring.
I don't have that particular number, and I would be afraid to kind of give a guesstimate.
I get that.
But it's a large percentage of our leadership that will be retiring, especially in the larger departments like DPW and utilities. We have a few scattered around the more administrative positions as well. So we're losing a lot of great talent.
This might not be the appropriate time for this question, but how many people have we hired since we last met?
I don't have that number, Terry. I am going to assume it is about 15.
Okay. When we meet, could you make available since the previous meeting, how many people we've hired, in what departments? It doesn't need to be their names, but what job positions did we fill?
Okay.
And likewise, what we looked at terminations and retirements, so that we would have I think that the public is not aware how many people leave. I think we might even be interested in knowing, now that this is on television, how many people just left. What was our turnover rate? Because I think people need to understand that there is turnover in lots of jobs. And so because we are hiring 15 people does not mean that was 15 new jobs.
Correct.
That might be a net total of, whatever it might be. So if you could let us know that, if we could maybe put that on the agenda as a standard report. How many people were hired, how many people were fired, how many people retired, and what that turnover rate was.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, just to answer Councilwoman Castle's question, I know that under the previous administration, we had some analysis done. We were looking at probably over 55% of the workforce that were old enough would be eligible to roll into retirement. That's why succession planning became such a critical issue. I would say that I don't think those numbers have dwindled that much since then. And it is something that we definitely have to focus on. There have been times when we realized somebody that had 30 years or so with the parish ended up coming up, filling out their paperwork, and they were leaving. That caused me to shudder a bit because there are a lot of institutional knowledge that leaves when someone all of a sudden just ends up, leaving and retiring. So it's something that definitely has to be focused on.
John?
Go ahead, Terry. if you have
One more comment, and look, this could get me in trouble because I love our senior members of our staff and even those who are older. Let me tell you, there's nothing any more discouraging than sitting behind somebody who just won't leave, who's well qualified, abundantly qualified to retire, perhaps needs to retire, and just won't leave. And I see that in other industries. I'm not particularly calling anybody out here. I don't mean to imply that. But it is discouraging to our younger members of our team to not see any movement. So certainly succession planning is important. It's important to do it so that young people know that if we're planning for it, then we expect it to happen and they can expect it to.
Okay. Mr. Caglin?
Hi, Talita. Good report. I just have a question regarding the safety manual.
Yes,
You talked about the need to hire a full-time safety manager position.
correct.
Prior to that, and you and I have had conversations about this, there are numerous companies, a lot of safety consulting companies that do a package safety manual. And what they do, they'll come to your facility and they'll do a complete, total assessment. We had one done for a small contracting company. I think it ended up costing us $1,200, and every year they came back and looked at it and renewed it for $800. That was years ago, so I'm sure it's not the same price. But have you looked into that as far as, is there a company out there that does this for municipalities or parish or county governments that might be able to help you in that regard?
There are some of the companies associated with Alliance Safety have offered an opportunity to come in and look at some of the areas that we are concerned about in terms of writing a safety manual that is generic enough to be delivered to all of our employees, but also end with best practices for safety. We've looked at some of the programs that looked at worksite safety, so really specific to our operational staff when they're looking at JSAs and what should happen at each particular job site. But, I really want someone that can be there and develop and initiate those particular programs that our one safety officer won't be able to do.
Sure. And the other thing is, in addition to the JSAs and other things, there are certain chemicals that we use in mosquito
Correct.
control and in the DPW, lubricants and things like that have to be handled with care. You can't just dispose of them any way you want. So just food for thought.
Right, the standardization of those particular chemicals, making sure that we have them properly recorded, how to dispose of them, that the employees are trained on how to react in terms of emergencies, if there's fumes, if there's contact. Those things are important to me.
And like I said, there's a number of companies I know that will customize a package for your specific needs. So that would be I would recommend that. Look into it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes, just to kind of piggyback off what Councilman Cagnolati is saying, the Knowledge City program that we're moving into will allow us to specifically develop specified training along with some of the things that they have as far as CAN programs. So I think that Mr. Lee and I were talking about, for instance, sexual harassment training. That's something that's already, it's kind of standard throughout the industry, throughout the country. So that's something that's standard with Knowledge City. Knowledge City will allow us to expand all the training that we need to expand, as detailed as we need to expand it, utilizing CAN programs already available. And if we need to have specific programs that we put into that system, it would do that as well. Not only will it do that, but it will also track each employee that takes that particular training and verify through a testing process afterward that they understood the material, and that will be archived, okay? One thing that we're trying to do is to reduce the amount of time that Talita or Wanda would have to spend in front of a person giving them training. If we have to record that training through our video department, have IT place it on the system and have it in the Knowledge City, or what we want to start calling Ascension University, okay? That information will be available, and it will be tracked, it will be monitored. Also, you talk about being able to move up into different positions. The supervisor will be planning on additional training. If you want to move from a entry-level position into a supervisory role, whether a certain amount of training and requirement be necessary to do that. That would be a path that they will say that I need to take this, I need to do this, I need to be able to be competent here, and that would be made available. Now, I'm saying it maybe seemed to be oversimplified. It's a lot of work to get that done, but that's the direction that we're headed.
Couple things real quick, Ken, and that brings to mind, one of the things we need to make sure of when we do those things is that we need to make sure we're communicating to the employees that just because we go through those training steps doesn't guarantee anything. It provides an opportunity, because at the end of the day, you have a lot of folks that get frustrated or upset that, hey, when you talked to me back 2, 3, 4 years ago, you told me if I did this, this, and this, I was going to be a supervisor. And that's not necessarily the case. This will provide you with an opportunity to do that. What I would say as far as a safety officer or manager is concerned, I agree with that, in that we got to stop being reactive and be proactive, and make sure that we're putting programs out there that our employees have ahead of time, that they know the knowledge to develop a JLA when they get on the job site, to look at the particular issues that are with that particular job that they're on when it comes to DPW. But also within the everyday stuff, there are some CAN programs that are there, but you may have some specifics within a certain office that has a particular hidden pinch point or something of that nature that would have to be pointed out and so forth, that you can bring people in to help you develop those programs and disseminate them out to the general workers at safety meetings and different things like that. And I think that's headed in the right direction. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit further with the next agenda item as well. So all those are good steps to be taken and moving in the right direction, no doubt about that. Ms. Terry, you had something else?
Yes, please. I'm curious about the timeline for Ascension University. I mean, nobody's going to be accountable if we don't have a timeline. So when is this is this officially happening? Has it been blessed and all that? And are we moving forward? And when will we have it done? And at what point, what increments are we going to report back to this committee to let us know what pace we're on?
Well, I think it really goes into the next section of the agenda when we're talking about staffing and our ability to handle some of the programs and the projects that we currently have. In the last few months, we've been placing our stones, so to say, to identify the needs and start preparing the direction we want to go with a lot of these programs. And so we're really in the preparation phase. Obtaining Knowledge City has given us that opportunity to get some of those standardized programs that are simplistic enough, that our new hires that our older employees can understand. But to build upon those programs, it's not just computer-based, right? We also need classroom training. We need support from the local colleges, support from the manufacturers when we're talking about our tractor operators and our drivers. So Ascension University is really a university that will allow us to obtain all those instructional elements and provide that to the employees. Now, a lot of the conversations haven't been held with the departments to determine what the additional needs they would have. I know that currently DPW is looking at some additional training options where they can have some hands-on training with their employees. How do we build that into the system so that we can properly track it and report it out, and the employees can see what they've been able to accomplish? And so those are some of the elements of the program that we're still working out. We still want to make sure that we have buy-in and feedback from the employees about where they want to see their developmental opportunities go.
Okay, so here's the problem I see, Toledo. Every 4 years, the administration changes here, or has the potential to change. But Ascension Parish is going to be here, indefinitely. So, what do we have to do to create a program, have it blessed by everybody that needs to bless it, establish it in such a way that it is ongoing through administrations, that it outlives the last naysayer, and enables us to truly have this. And look, if you need to tell me that we're 10 years away from this, that's honest,
Mm-hmm.
and we would be fine with that. I promise you, in 10 years, I won't be here to ask you if you're going to, if you're going to have got which timeline is, how have you done? But let's say we're, 4 years away. Should we be talking to you in 4 years and 3 years and 2 years and saying, where are we going with this?
Mm-hmm.
So just, maybe not this meeting, but the next one, give some thought to what this really looks like. And look, I understand that it may be many years before this is absolutely up and running and right. That's okay. We're not looking for next year it's going to be here. What we're looking for is some realistic assessment of how long this would take. What are your obstacles? Will the obstacles be the transition from administration to administration to administration? What do you see as the obstacles to successfully implementing this? Because this could mean a tremendous amount to our parish.
Mm-hmm.
I think this could solve some problems. And certainly long-term, we would buy in. But we need, we need a long-term plan. And we need to understand what the obstacles are, so that we could try to put legislation in place that was an impediment to your obstacles.
Kind of in a nutshell, is basically between now and the next election cycle, a program needs to be put in place and sustainable to the point of where when the next administration comes in, they don't feel the need to stop it,
Mm-hmm.
maybe upgrade it and make it better, but not necessarily get rid of it and those type of things. So that, I guess that's kind of the challenge you face with it and what we would be looking for. Going back a step, when we're talking about succession planning, have we done any kind of survey with the employees to find out what their plans are as far as retirements and those type of things? With any succession plan, I would believe the first step, and before we even start working at developing a succession plan, it may be good to come up with a very simple survey that we identify all of our workers of a certain age and a certain years of seniority as far as experience working for the parish. You may have someone that's 55, 60 years old, it's only got 10 years of service, or you may have someone that's 55 years old but 30 years of service, or 50 years old kind of thing, to find out, identify those folks first off who are in that corridor to have the potential to retire, and then send them a survey asking them what their plans are as far as how long they think they're going to work. And I don't know what the legalities are with that, but hopefully there wouldn't be much impediment to doing those type of things to where if we had someone in a higher level position that says, hey, I'm going to be here another 3 years, we have an opportunity to put someone, identify who has the potential for working, taking that position over, whether it's in-house or not, and start them working with those people to get that knowledge, that institutional knowledge that Ken talked about earlier, handed on to where we can have hopefully a seamless transfer when that person does decide to leave. I think would be beneficial to us. So understanding that, I would like to see, when you be able to pull that off, but within the next few months, I would like to see some information on that, if at all possible. Mr. Joseph, you had another question?
Yeah, Mr. Lynn, I know we do an annual audit, and, some department get great praises and everything. In the audit, do your office get audited by what you do or just by the funding of what your department do?
It's normally not the financial audit like they do. Purchasing gets a lot of that, and as well as the finance department. There may be some looking at it just for expenditure of funds and everything, but as far as HR type of functionality, the accounting company that's our auditor doesn't, get into that situation.
Okay, so we do not have any state or anybody come here to evaluate you besides the company that we politically go out and advertise and get?
Right, not since I've been here.
Oh.
I'm aware of.
Yes, and that's typical.
Okay. Ms. Terry brought up a good point. How can we look at making sure our HR and the government goes down? Under Ronnie Hughes' administration, I was just looking at some paperwork. I was trying to get rid of some garbage, and come to find out, RUS did a study under Ronnie Hughes' administration, and they did every department. Basically, they did a desktop for every department. Have you ever seen that?
Well, it's something similar to what actually SSA did for you in terms of the overall efficiency of the department.
Right.
But yes, there are companies that will come in and really.
No, did you see the RUS document they did?
Oh. That was one that was done before, right?
Right.
Councilman?
No, sir.
Okay, so I would like, if you wouldn't mind, if SSA did a study and compare, we can dig up that document. I only have two pieces of that document, and it was in permit, and the other one was in public works. But from my understanding, they did the whole government, the whole Sanchez Parish government, and then like I say, the next administration came here, and I don't know what happened to that document neither.
Right.
I never seen it again. So I understand exactly what Ms. Terry is saying, that we need to be consistent with what we're going to do for the future. So that's definitely the only thing I have an issue with, once again, is we have to go hire somebody, and it can be political, used in favor to certain people in certain departments. Administration, vice, the government authority. So we definitely need to work on that to get a real true picture of what we are doing in Ascension Parish in HR.
Okay. Let's go on to agenda item number 4, discussion of human resources staffing update. Mr. Leader.
Okay. For our staffing, the first thing that I really want to show you is really an informal organizational chart. This is something that that President Matassa still has to approve. Our department currently serves about 1,100 employees, and that includes all of our additional third-party agencies such as the fire department, the clerk of courts, some of the judicial staff, and we also have other agencies that are interested in using our human resources services. If you can bring up the slide. Thank you. Here we go. Currently, we have 5 full-time employees in human resources, and that does include myself and the assistant director. We have a human resources coordinator, a part-time benefits manager, a full-time benefits administrator, and HR generalist. So for 1,100 employees, these are the people that are servicing their particular needs. We are looking at additional staff, which has been approved through the most recent title and pay class plan that will go into effect on the 30th, so in a few days. But what I really want to show you guys is the impact that we currently have on services. So for the full-time roles, and this is not including those special projects or those annual projects that I mentioned before, we have 4 of our staff members that are doing the work of a 60-hour person per week. So they're really overwhelmed at this time. There are a lot of things that they don't get to touch within that 40-hour work week. They don't get to touch within a 50-hour work week when they do work some overtime, or we do have special projects that need attention. So that really affects our services. And it was a shock when we did the job analysis because, you know, a lot of the services that we provide are standard, but they're also based upon, they're paper-based. We don't have form-filled documents, and the majority of the documents that we have to create for our employees, we have to create them using our own words because their needs are so different. So a great example is we went through a process of reallocating employee funding, making sure that the employee that was working in that department was being paid from that department's funds. It took us a day and a half, and that was just to process the paperwork. The next few days is moving them in our time system and recording them in our Excel forms so that we can properly respond to requests for information for those particular employees. So in a week's time, we had those changes completed, but what else fell because of that? And so, you know, what we're looking at is really the performance needs within our department. The special projects, such as performance management, once those deliverables are received, well, they're ours. That means that someone in my staff has to continuously manage that program and support the supervisors in those particular programs. The same thing with our succession planning and our verification program. All of those programs are going to be held with us once we receive those deliverables, and we have to work them and make sure that we're in compliance with those particular programs. So some of the additional staffing that we are looking at requesting, and I know definitely that President Matassa is considering, is a human resources specialist that'll work with our safety and our training manager to make sure that those needs are really melted together, that we're getting to the culture, changing the training habits of our supervisors. Obviously, we're definitely looking at a safety manager and an additional safety officer. This parish is huge, and we own a lot of assets, and we need to be able to manage those assets where they don't become a risk for the parish or for the constituents. And then last but not least, a recruiter. My human resource generalist spends 75% of her time in recruitment. Now, a lot of these issues in terms of recruitment will be fixed with the new ERP program that's coming, but as we're looking at building our advanced recruitment techniques, they will also still grow in terms of the need to get out of the office and to touch the supervisors and really understand what their needs are and to sell the parish as the #1 employer. And so those are that's more work that my department has to do, especially to service those 1,100 employees that we have. We are looking at an opportunity to reconfigure the HR department in Donaldsonville. That is our only location as of now, and if we are going to bring on additional staff, we have to have somewhere to place them as well. So we're working on that project, and then we also want to be able to focus on consistency in policies, consistency in some of the best practices from human resources. Again, some of those best practices will be addressed in the ERP, but some of those really need to be established within the culture of Ascension Parish throughout with the supervisors. A lot of them have only seen what human resources can offer in the parish because they have a lot of tenure within the parish. But human resources has changed. We're not simply the paper pushers anymore. We're the business partners. And that mindset has to be able to change and has to be able to keep up with the times for compliance issues and training and support issues that they may have. And last but not least, because we're located on the West Bank and the majority of our employees are on the East Bank, we do spend a lot of time in commuting back and forth. So we are making a request as well to President Matassa for a pool vehicle.
Ms. Terry, you got any questions?
I don't think so. Only one comment. I am not sitting here with a desire to grow the government of Ascension Parish and to have, be the number one employer in size in this parish. We want to do our work as efficiently and effectively as we possibly can. And I'm hopeful that the ERP is going to help you.
Correct.
To make your office more efficient. And perhaps, but I don't think it's going to drive down the number of employees you need. Do you really believe that with the ERP in place, that you're still going to have the need for this many more employees?
It will. It will reduce some of the paperwork from some of the workflow issues because we don't have the technology that we do have. But that doesn't mean the contacts, the employee relations, the trainings, the additional support to supervision will change.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mr. Cagney, anything?
I was just going to echo what Terry said. You had mentioned that these 4 positions would each generate a 60-hour position. With ERP, that should be reduced. Am I correct?
Not necessarily, because some of the secondary agencies that we do provide for, some of their needs will remain the same.
So there'll still be a lot of paperwork?
It'll still be a lot of paperwork. The ERP, our ERP for human resources, is really a good database on tracking how we interact with our employees, but it doesn't change that interaction that's required.
Ken, are we getting paid by these agencies to house them in our buildings and take care of their?
That's something that we even asked our legal advisor on, what type of relationships as far as intergovernmental agreements we have between some of the agencies and what some of that responsibility would be. We're still researching that, and O'Neill has been on vacation the last few days. Some instances, I know that when we provide services, there is a certain amount they pay, like in maintenance or some of our accounting and everything. Those agencies contribute to a certain percentage of their budget to that particular purposes. We're trying to find out exactly how that spells out as far as HR is concerned. Another thing, Councilman, that concerns me, and we're trying to get a little more clarification, what are the expectations of these different groups? Mr. Johnson and I were in a meeting one time with the fire department, just the expectation of what they thought they were to get and what they were receiving. was completely different than what actually was there. We had to have a meeting to clarify it. We want to make sure that happens with also the HR responsibilities, because there's sometimes, and I guess there's a request to do something, and then sometimes something that we think that is a part of the product we're supposed to provide for them. What we're supposed to do for them is not, it's not asked. So that's some clarification we're going to have to do that, and some cleaning up. And we've been working with legal to try to make sure that happens.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, Mr. Lee, those 1,100 workers, Ms. Terry had asked you previous about the turnover ratio. Can you at least give us a list in department, fire department, how many they have, parish government, how many they have, what you actually administrate, okay, add that to. And my question, you do not have a vehicle in HR?
No, sir.
You do not have any?
No, sir.
As a director, you don't have any?
No, sir.
Previous director had vehicles. I mean, all of a sudden, we don't have one for them?
I think that one thing that we did, we reduced, take-home vehicles for people at a certain level, okay, and just kind of set up pool cars.
Well,
But,
I mean,
and now
I hate to say it this way, at a certain level, but we talking about a director. I'm pretty sure every director had a choice to do either or for the department, I'm pretty sure, huh?
Not
'Cause
all.
I mean-
Not all. Not all. It was with some, not all. But I do, being that HR is on the West Bank, we are looking into making sure there's a pool car available.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I was just real shocked when she said that, because I'm like, I've been here for 13 years, and every director I know had a vehicle. So either if they was on the West Bank or the East Bank, they had a vehicle. So I hope administration will correct that problem real quick.
I'll get with the president on that, Mr.
All right.
Governor.
One of the things that we kind of hinted with here, and I think it deserves a little bit more focus on, is we're not only talking about the employees as you think of with DPW and the administrative assistants and HR and all the other departments that are there. We're also talking about, as Ken alluded to, the volunteer fire departments, as well as the paid district within Prairieville. Also, the library folks, the mental health people, the council on aging. There's a whole bunch of functions that we provide to those different agencies now. One of the things that we need to do, and it's going to take some time from your staff, is that we don't want to have an incident or a situation to where we show up at the door one day and say, oh, by the way, you're going to start paying us X amount of dollars. Because that turns into a deal of, wait a minute, we've been doing this for umpteen years, and now all of a sudden you want us to pay for it. We need to make sure that they understand what services we're providing or what services we have to provide legally. We may not be doing them today, but we're going to start taking them over, whether that be the court system or whoever, and then understand where that cost or that activity's got to be accounted for. To make sure we make that as smooth a transition as possible. You hit a lot of it as far as put the onus on his back, but a lot of this has to do with President Matassen making a presentation to him to make sure he's on board with these things and where you're trying to go. Justification, like what Ms. Terry talked about, I agree. If there's some resources that we can bring in on an interim basis to provide some services for them, and we can do them cheaper than hiring people on a permanent basis, by all means, we need to look at that and make sure that we're not just hiring people to hire people. Same thing what we talked about with some of our, with other things within the parish. If we don't, have to expand the amount of people we have working for us, the better off we can provide those services in a different manner at a cheaper rate. Then by all means, that's the avenue we need to look at, in my opinion. Anything else? Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 5, the amend the contract with SSA to include performance management and job descriptions. I will say that I was a little bit wrong in this thing. I had, when Mr. Dawson talked to me about putting this item on there, I was under an impression we already had part of this in the contract, and he went back and did some research, and the the job description part of it, there was a small part in there when it came to combining some jobs, if I'm not mistaken, that was part of it, but as far as the rest of the job descriptions on all the positions we have within the parish was not. So that's part of what this discussion is about. So Ms. Toledo, you want to bring us up to speed as to why we want to do this, and anything else within that? And then I see Dr. Slaughter's here and her team. We appreciate them coming out and answer any questions we might have.
Yes, a lot of it has to do with some of the staffing issues that we have, looking at how many projects my team can currently take and the importance of a lot of the projects. We know that SSA has done some great work with the parish previously, that they understand the culture, that they understand the direction that the council and President Matassa wants to take when we look at performance management. Now, without our job descriptions being fully vetted and completed, doing a performance management plan or presenting anything to the employees would be fruitless. If they don't understand their jobs and what part they play with the parish, then they can't properly perform their jobs. So we are looking at a quick deliverable so that we can make sure that within, the next few years that we can expand upon the performance management process, that we have someone in place to be able to support that process from within the Human Resources Office, and that can stand the test of time, like you were mentioning, Ms. Terry, through the various administrations. And so one of the recommendations for that quick deliverable would be for us to request those services from SSA and amend the current contract.
Mr. Dawson?
Just to bring, to your memory, part of this performance is also a piece of the assessment that was done, by SSA, something that we need to do to move to a more of a performance-based type of merit type system. The employees, we're looking forward to that, and it takes quite a bit to get this done. So we own a pretty tight timeline, to be quite honest with you, and having assistance in getting this done is important, as Ms. Toledo said, because of her staff being kind of loaded up with a lot of things, is to kind of move forward with this as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. And I think that we have, Dr. Slaughter here today to kind of talk about maybe a little bit about what that encompasses, so that the expectation of what's involved in getting it done is important for everyone to understand. Okay,
So before we do that, I do want to ask a question, because a statement was made that we're on a tight timeline. So what's the consequences if we don't finish this on time that you set for yourself?
Well, oh, you mean I should leave the parish after that? No, I'm teasing.
No, we're talking about bringing in a third party to do this for us, and do it within a short period of time. So it's going to cost us money to do that.
Yes.
And we're obviously stretching HR. And so to make sure the public's aware of, hey, we're going out there and spending some money
Yes.
to make this happen,
Yes.
there's got to be a consequence to say, if I want it done by next week, what happens if I don't get it done by next week?
Right.
What's the downside of that? So if we're saying we need to do this within 2 or 3 months, whatever that time frame is set, I'm okay with that, but what's the justification for it to say that I need to bring this organization in to do this for us if we don't get it accomplished within this time frame?
Sure, I can. President Matassa and I talked about this, and one thing that was very important was that we were able to go to a merit-based type evaluation system by next year, 2019, I think. Okay, this year there was a method of giving increases that was not based upon evaluation and those kind of things. So I guess the thing that could be a consequence is not delivering that, in that particular time span that we expect to do, and I know President Matassa expects it to be delivered, and quite honestly, our employees expect it to be delivered. I think that the consequence of not getting that done is going to be going to affect, our employees, because they're looking to move into this particular method, and there's a lot of training and things involved in being able to do so, and so that we're committed to get the assistance to make sure that happens.
Ms. Terry?
Well, I'd like to comment. It certainly was recommended, I think probably in 2017, that be done, early in 2017. So we didn't have performance appraisals in 2017, and we didn't have any in 2018. And if we don't get this done very soon, we're not going to have any in 2019. And so, I think my favorite reason why this needs to be done is when we have an employee who's terminated, and we go to his file, and we have no performance appraisal history to look at to see if this is something that is an isolated occurrence, or has he been disciplined for this or talked to about this over and over and over again. And the longer it takes us to build this historical data, the longer going forward our performance appraisal or our employee reviews are not good. When we go to fire somebody, which we have to do from time to time, this council has a hard time firing people when we open that file and there's no performance appraisal on them for the last 5 years. And when are we going to get them in there so that the clock stops on that? We have to start building a history of this so that we can fairly and impartially administer terminations in this organization. And I know that's one thing that our employees want, is fair and impartial termination. If I got to be fired, by God, fire me. But if John Doe didn't get fired, don't fire me. And if you've been telling me all along that I'm doing just fine, and now you fired me, then that's something else. And we can't stop that until we have performance appraisals. And I'm disappointed, as Talita knows, that we have not gotten this done. So I am, and I don't blame her. No, I just know that it's just time consuming. So being disappointed that this has not gotten done, I'd certainly like to hear from Dr. Slaughter, but I'm going to already make a motion that we hire SSA to do a performance management and to do our job descriptions and get this stuff done.
Got a motion on the floor?
Second.
Second by Mr. Joseph. Mr. Cagliari, you had something?
I just had a question in relation to the two matters at hand here: performance management, job descriptions. Job descriptions have to come first. Am I right? If a guy doesn't know what his job description is, how can he perform to either do it in an excellent capacity or not so good? So my question, how many job descriptions are we talking about in number? And at what level do we go down to say, if it's a general laborer, is he going to have a job description?
Everyone should have a job description, and we're looking at about 200, I believe, 200 or so.
So we're talking about parish government employees, not
Correct.
not the other, fire departments and all. They have their own.
Agencies,
Okay.
correct.
So from an HR perspective, we're talking about 400 employees, 450 employees.
We're looking at about 500 employees,
Okay.
500 or more.
And about 200 descriptions, you would
Correct.
say? Okay.
Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, also on this here, I wanted to ask Dr. Slaughter a question.
Just gonna bring her up in just a second.
Yeah, then that's when I'm gonna refer my
Okay.
question to her.
Dr. Slaughter, if you want to come up and give us your perspective on this and what we're looking at with this contract.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll be happy to, Councilman. Let me where would you like me to start? Answer a question? Would you like me to start with the job descriptions?
Yeah, give us with the presentation and
Okay.
go through that, and that may generate some more
Let
questions.
me do that without spending a tremendous amount of time on any particular element unless someone has a question. Thank you. If we could go to the next slide. as Talita just said, and you pointed out, the two elements of job descriptions and performance management systems, thank you, have to go together. So what we know about implementing a performance management program is it is not for the faint of heart, and it needs to be done carefully and it needs to be done well, and it is it's really a change management process and project. Especially because in Ascension Parish, you have not had variable merits, and you have not had people who, quite honestly, have been given clear expectations. That's what they've told us. And so you got to have clear expectations before you evaluate somebody. And so therein lies the gap between the design and then giving people clear expectations and then giving them time to improve their performance or perform in the way you expect and then to rate them. And to do that in a fair way that builds accountability in the system, which I know is what council is very interested in doing. So I think that if this is done well, and there's some elements that we see are really important from our experience, we think are really important to getting this done well. If this is done well, it can really help advance and change the culture to one that is more performance-based and accountability-based. It is going to require new skill sets from your supervisors. They've got to be able to talk to people about what they expect. They've got to be able to coach people, as Talita was talking about earlier, and they have to be able to fairly evaluate people and communicate that. Managers need to be responsible for their supervisors' ability and willingness and proficiency in doing that, and so on up, so that it goes all the way up in the organization. If it's not done well, you will not have enough time to have all the appeals hearings that you're going to have, because it will be a morass, and we are going to make sure that that doesn't happen, because it is too important, and you don't have to make this happen in a way that it scares people or is frustrating to people. It needs to be a very natural process and one that makes people feel very good about their job. So if you look at the timeline, we did meet with the director and assistant director and Ken Dawson recently to try and get a feel for timeline and what the expectations were. So this can be adjusted. This has some assumptions as part of it, but you would start by completing the job descriptions. And as that is an imperative for being able to give clear expectations, that needs to be done. We have been working with the HR staff on job descriptions. Some are further along than others. You have some positions in some departments where there's nothing. It's not done at all. So we need to help HR probably, pull those together and then refine the other ones. We believe, based on some conversations, that you need to make sure that the Fair Labor Standard Act exempt, non-exempt status is correct, and we can help with that process and testing that. But I will tell you that in our experience, one of the most important ingredients in this being a success is to understand, and I know we've talked about, it seems like we've talked about this quite a lot, but to really understand what the council and the administration wants this system to do. Because anybody can develop a form. We've seen the best and the worst, the most complicated, the simplest. One of the best managers I ever saw in terms of giving performance feedback just had a sheet. It was just pretty much a blank sheet. It just had a couple of lines on it, but he was masterful. He kept files, documented things, good things, followed up with people on their successes, and the same with marginal performers. So a lot of people want to focus on the form, but it's really the system that counts. And by the end of this process, we have to be able to work with your human resources staff to develop a set of guidelines so that there will be continuity, as well as building capabilities into your current management team. If we don't do that, then all we've done is given you something and it's sticking your hand in a pail of water, as I like to say. So we really need to understand expectations, And we also need to make sure that everything that we put forward is viable, not only from a legal standpoint, but also in this humongous investment that you're making in ERP. Is there a way that we can make this more seamlessly integrated and make it easier for your staff to do? I do think that in our experience in having done this with the state, taking 30,000 workers and putting them under a single performance appraisal, which had not been done before, and with other parishes and governmental organizations, there are some interpretations by legal counsel that we really want to work through about withholding merit completely, timing of our performance improvement period, and those are the kinds of things that we really want to check out long before even a pilot program is conceived. So we would see that happening in month 1, month 2, but very quickly, I think, because that can drag on unnecessarily. I think immediately after that, we would see a few different things. One is to talk with your senior leadership, executive team, and department heads about their desires. What's going to work for them? What's the real situation in their area? What are their supervisors going to be able to handle? And that leads to everything from making the form easier to who's going to review it, who reviews the reviewers, how do we get consistency across the board, et cetera. We also think that you need a group of champions. We think that you need people in each department potentially, although you have some small departments, but you need some people who are going to be good communicators and listen to their colleagues who are not necessarily supervisors, although they could be, but just good folks that other people trust and who will be candid with us. Because we've got to get real feedback from real employees and understand what's being said, what the concerns are, what people are excited about, what the opportunities are as we go. So we would see this group working very closely with Human Resources and with us to really help design the rollout plan, the communication, how people want to receive communication, et cetera. And then we would have a pilot project, and choosing the pilot project is going to be really important. It doesn't have to be just in one area. We've seen it done a lot of different ways, but we really want to test what it is we'd be using in a training session, what kind of job aids we would be giving people, and then how well or how hard is it to capture the expectations for performance. I will be very honest with you. There's parts of the parish that I think that if you had expectations such as this is what time you report to work, this is what time you get off of work. If you have any problem, you have to call in by a certain time. We don't abuse the equipment, and this is what this means. Here's how you take care of whatever you've been issued from the parish. I mean, I think that there are very basic expectations that really, when we hear complaints from your employees, lots of times it's because, well, this guy isn't doing his job. But when you boil it down, he's not showing up for work, or he's abusing equipment, or trying to get out of doing something. So I don't think that your people want or need 47 expectations and big rating sheets, but I do think that they need a system that's very clear and is user-friendly and is substantial enough to do, as you all were just talking about, documentation, being able to provide high-performing employees with feedback on their performance and justify a merit raise, and when that's withheld, to legally be able to justify that. So we would hope that that pilot project would run for a certain period of time. In a perfect world, we'd like to have 60, 90 days. But again, it is just to see an accelerated version of the process and what are the areas that are going to be tough for people to do. We have got to start trainings pretty early for managers, once some of the goals are settled and we understand what the administration and the council is really looking for. And we believe that every single one of your employees needs to be invited to a session in a not huge group so that they feel comfortable asking questions and they can hear about this firsthand. This is not something to do online or give some talking points to somebody to go out and talk to people. This is the real thing, and we want it done well, and we want to hear directly from people. So given that some of this is going on at the same time as open enrollment, we're not really sure how we get people in this meeting and that meeting, but we'll figure that all out. We would hope that we would be able to close out the pilot and learn from that, and then with the lessons learned, really be able to take it to, thank you, Talita, thank you, really begin to take it into 2019, as you said, so that people would be getting their first session with their supervisor or manager to set expectations early in 2019, and we would have about 9 months. Now, this is conjecture and this is assumptions, and you are welcome, as well as the administration, as we go through this, to change that. But that is a legitimate rating period, and it's 3/4 of the year. It would allow you to go through almost a full year and then close out that rating period, have the interviews and coaching sessions with employees, developmental plans, or whatever type of performance goals we want to have, and then develop recommendations for merit pay. If you did that, then theoretically by the end of 2019, you'd be able to give employees raises. This is what we're concerned about. So I think that from some of our work together in the past, I will take responsibility for not liking the term cost of living raises. However, you need something to move your pay plan along. It's usually small, but it is something that keeps it up 1%, 2%. Maybe everybody except people who are XYZ get that. But in terms of merit, it should have some merit attached to it. And so that's where I think we really have to work together along with your team to do that. Finally, I think that you've got to figure out what you want to do with employees who are not doing well in the rating period, and how we're going to deal with that, and re-ratings and guidelines and policies about that. So just to cut to the chase, this is how we see it potentially lining up on a timeline. So the first 60, 90 days, first 30 days, we hit the job descriptions really hard. And we can decide, is it low-hanging fruit, and finish up the ones that are closer, or tackle the new ones. But we're prepared to do that right away, and also work with you as the Personnel Committee, administration, to really understand expectations for the design that would be used in the pilot. Working with you all the way through, as well as parish attorney, IT, and finance at periodic points to make sure that we're still on track. Creating that ambassadors team so that we begin to get some sort of change agents in the organization and good communication. And then tremendous communication meetings, training, top down. So that's an absolute. We see the pilot project being tucked in the beginning, as we said, and then learnings from that so that you could actually roll out the system in January, and managers and supervisor training. We're not really sure how much they need. We know it's more than an hour, and there's a limit to what people can absorb and handle, but this will implode if you don't have training for your folks. So we're committed to doing that. We, in other clients, especially in private industry, we'll do things like videotape the trainings or, develop things that new employees could come in and orientation and watch. And we even got Governor Foster on videotape about performance appraisal. So there's no telling who needs to deliver the message, but we try and figure out who is best to do some of those things. And then, as you see, the idea would be determination of pay raises. And again, some of this is fluid. That can be as early as it is, or it could be pushed out later in the year. But I think, as you were describing the cycles, a year goes by fast. And so, if we don't get the rating period started, then we're really going to be pushing people for another year. And I think that's going to add to the stress of what they're going through. So, is that good?
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
helpful?
Couple of questions, and you kind of mentioned it in some of your presentation here, but it's kind of a twofold question. So one of the big concerns an employee is going to have is, so how am I going to tie my rating to a certain merit raise? What percentage of raise am I going to get based off of the merit? And the other thing is, I'm sure, because I've had some conversation with employees already, is, so if I got a supervisor that likes me or dislikes me, how do I make sure that my evaluation is fair? So I know some of my experience has been to where if I've got a guy that I'm calling the worst in the world, I've got to have specific instances, certain dates and times where employee X did whatever to make him the worst, or vice versa. If he's the best thing since sliced bread, I've got specific examples that I'm putting out there that tells me why he's better than everybody else in that particular department within that, or simple things to do to where whenever it goes back for review. But how do you, what's your plan to work that?
Yeah, I think that those are excellent techniques that you just described. If I'm going to rate somebody very high or very low on whatever that scale is, or numerical or words, meeting expectations, excellent, poor, performer, whatever, that I should have to justify that. Because if I'm giving somebody the most merit pay that I can, I ought to be able to say they're fantastic, and we ought to know that. And then if I'm not, then not only do I need to be able to justify it, but I think that the employee deserves an opportunity to go through some sort of development plan and potentially be re-rated, so that you'll know, was this miscommunication? Is this something that, I have somebody here who really can't quite absorb the job, maybe over their head, or just doesn't have the right personal skills to be successful. I think that you're right. I think that employees are going to focus in on the percentage of raise. And I think that, we have to decide. We tossed around a number of ideas, things that we've all seen in our experience, where you may have a pool of money, let's say 4% for all employees within a certain area. Now, is that a unit? Is that a sub-department? But at the end of the day, we have to, decide who gets how much, or there's 3% for people, and you can give up to 4, and you can give less than 1. And what I think is very important, and what we've seen work in similar situations, is making sure that all supervisors' ratings are reviewed by their supervisor or manager and signed off on. So you at least have another reviewer who's looking at what is going on. So if there's anything that's out of the ordinary, and I just hate to say it, we're going to have to look at every one of them. So what we may do is we may actually truncate the rating period in time, or in a cascade of departments, so that we can make sure this first time out that we're looking at things and we understand what's going to happen. The worst thing in the world is to just let it go, and then we find out, as we've seen happen in other places, that, well, this guy gave 50% of his people this rating and 50% of his people this rating, and he told them, don't worry about it, next year we'll reverse it. So you didn't get as much this year, but you're going to get them next year. And it took us a while to figure that one out, but we eventually did. So, you need this to be done the right way. And so some of those things that you talked about are definitely the ways to do that.
A couple of things as well. I know my biggest issue with dealing where I work at is remembering to go through it periodically and talk to these people. So what do you have in mind as far as setting up reminders, whether it be monthly or quarterly, to
Yeah.
remind these supervisors, hey, it's time to go and have a review session, whether it be 5 or 10 minutes with each employee to say, hey, this is your track, and this is where you are, this is where you're not, this is where you need to step it up at, vice versa.
I think that there are tools now that make that a lot easier, and some of our corporate clients have apps and all kinds of things that really drop down menus and beautiful sorts of things. I think that you can remind people. This is a people thing. You can remind people, but the trick is, can I follow up with somebody? Is my manager going to follow up with me and say, Christelle, did you talk with your 4 subordinates? Because, I'm going to kind of wander around, see what's going on. That's what makes me comply with it, and then that's what makes the system work. After a while, you ought to be able to prompt people, and they ought to be able to do it. I watched the Human Resources Director of Albemarle get so frustrated with, and these were very well-paid, very senior people across the world, where she went to the CEO and said, get rid of performance appraisals. I'm tired of threatening, cajoling, sending emails, pop-up reminders, friendly reminders, mean reminders, emoji faces, snail mail. I'm tired of it, We either really want to give people feedback about their performance or we don't. And we either really want to develop our people or we don't. And he said, oh, no, we can't get rid of performance appraisal. And she said, well, I'm out. You remind them. You get them to do it. And within a month, they were done worldwide. So sometimes you just have to look like you really mean it. You have to really mean it.
My perspective, I think you're going to need more than 1 level up, probably 2, maybe even 3.
Yeah,
especially initial
may be
rollout
true.
of this as far as going through and evaluating this. Again, in some of the conversations I've had as far as getting it out of initial line management, if you will, with some folks to make sure that things are being done openly and honestly for all employees,
Right.
as well as making sure that the reminders to do things in a timely fashion are there.
Right.
And I think that would go a long way to making this happen. Now for the big question. How much is this going to cost us?
So we have estimated, although every time we talk to Toledo, we have more job descriptions to look at, but they need to be done. They're important. We think that we can. Do we have the slides, please? I think we have it up, put up on the slide. There we go. So we are,
Oh, we good. We good. Thank you.
so
We play well together.
we really want to try and leverage our resources and use a blended rate with consultants to get the job descriptions done. We don't want to spend your money on that. We want to spend your money on doing the performance management system right. And so you can divide the number by 9 months or 12 months or whatever you want to do it. We tried to get it down as far as we could so that we would be available. I think we're going to need to be on site quite a bit. I think this is too important that you're going to have some of our senior team, and we are going to have to be personally involved because it's just that important. So when we put our name on something, we want to make sure it works. And this one is very much related to cultural change. So we would be here.
Mr. Joseph, questions?
Yeah, Doc. My question is, Ms. Terry was talking about to make sure we keep this program in existence down the next administration. So your experience with other parishes, I'm pretty sure they have an ordinance that makes sure other administration follow this guideline, because it's like a 5 or 10 year outlook
Right.
projection. So I would like you to also assist us in making sure that we can come up with an ordinance that this HR program is seen in the future. So, I mean, I just like to add that to, that's what my question, to make sure that we implement and have a ordinance or law that no other administration can come in and change it every 4 years.
Right, right.
Okay?
Yes, I think that's important.
In your presentation, you talked about coordinating with IT, legal, counsel, and would that include the development of an ordinance?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I think.
She mentioned that in her presentation, but I didn't know
I
whether
think
that included.
I think the guidelines feed into the ordinance, and then you, as the policymakers, can determine how much detail you want in there. But I think that's an excellent idea. And I don't know if it's in your blue book or not, but it certainly needs to be in your policy manual. But should be codified to have the effect that you want it to have.
Yeah, because I know there's not in now. We don't have nothing. Because every administration I've been here have changed the game plan every time I've been here. So.
John? No? Ms. Terry?
I'm happy to see us moving forward. I think this is a critical piece, and be it manpower that has delayed it or just struggle to move it forward, we need to make it known that we intend that this piece get done. That was the will of the council. I think the closer we get to an election year, the more difficult it becomes to implement these kinds of policies, and I'll talk about it honestly. The last thing I want to see happen is the next parish, and I'm not implying one would do this, but I don't want the next parish candidate for parish president to go to every employee in this parish and say, look, if you don't want this to happen, I promise you as soon as I get elected, we won't have any more of that, and everybody's going to get a 4% raise every year. Well, guess what? We're in trouble.
Right.
Because this needs to happen. We cannot continue the way we have. It is not sustainable. We will end up with payroll that is so exorbitant and incompetent people not getting their job done, or people not being held accountable for the jobs we ask them to do. And that is just not acceptable in the modern world. Might have been acceptable 25 years ago, but it is not acceptable today. So I reiterate that I made a motion to get this done.
Just a quick, we will be getting updates as this thing rolls out from
Yes,
you. Okay.
yes,
This
absolutely.
committee and-
But we're gonna count on you and your colleagues, whomever would like to have input to help shape it. So, and then once we get the pieces in place, we'll have a plan.
Good.
We'll make sure you get that plan, and then we'll come back periodically.
Okay.
Believe me, I think that council members will hear if there are hiccups or issues. I think you'll be some of the first to know, maybe even before us. And so I think that having that kind of dialogue and
Probably
communication
right.
is important. It's happened before, so.
Mr. Dawson, we'll go with you next.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to kind of, reiterate the ERP process and what everything is being done with that. That's going to be a detailed coordination with the HR module and the performance monitoring module with the ERP program that we're implementing. Okay, the way that is designed, talking with Brandon O'Day, he said that it's flexible. This module for our performance monitoring is flexible. So in that flexibility, this process is going forward, it's going to be their coordination with the ERP process to make sure all those things that are being done. I can tell you it's quite an endeavor. I've kind of been directly involved with what's been happening so far with it. It's quite a bit. But I can also say there's been a considerable amount of support, a considerable amount of our employees kind of grabbing the torch and moving forward. And as Talita said, when that happens, there are going to be times when her department is going to be almost completely closed while they go through training and preparing that. But I think this is a real good process. I think that our employees have engaged it now. Of course, it was a little shock and everything that had to be done initially, and I'm kind of looking forward to the results as they come out. So you will be seeing a lot of that come out as far as the ERP system as well, and you will get updates in these meetings.
Okay. Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Ms. Matassi said. It is wish of this council that we move in this direction. We as a council voted to move this way. I know I have heard a lot of workers say individual have changed this and that. Not individual, not administration. This council, this government body have done this. So I would like every employee to understand that. We as the governing authority made the decision to move this direction, not one individual. So I will hope and everyone jump on board, because this is the new way. This is the future. We're not going back. That's all.
And to add to that, the conversations I've had with some of them as well, the conversations I've had with my colleagues up here to go with what Councilman Joseph said, our goal ultimately for the individual parish employee is that they will come out on the back end of this thing a much better workforce, not only for productivity that hopefully the public will see, but also in the day-to-day activity of their job and understanding what their job is, what their salary range is, and how do they get pay raises. It will be more structured and less dependent upon any particular whim of whether it be a supervisor or a parish president or anybody else that may have influence on what they do day in and day out as far as what their jobs are. And will make it hopefully a more stable workforce to deal with. That is my outcome of what and the reason I pitched into this thing, and I think everybody has the same goal in going forward with this thing to make sure that in the long run our employees are more better off with this type of a system in place and with what we're trying to accomplish here than what they are today, and by us not taking any action. So, Ms. Castle.
I agree with with the chairman's comments. I think that was eloquently stated. What we are looking for is an opportunity to take the politics out of your jobs, not to have politics in your job. And one of the things that our employees report is that they are a victim of from years and years and years is politics. And they don't need that. And this could do it. This is the opportunity for those who are doing their jobs and doing them well to be rewarded and to stand out. And for those who are not doing so well to step up and to really and truly understand what they must do to step up. And for those who just are not going to step up, to just fall out. And that gives us a modern, well-run, everything happening like it should parish. And that's what we, not only as a personnel committee, but as a council said, we wanted to happen. So thank you so much for your presentation, and Benny for so eloquently stating what we're looking to accomplish here.
And I'll echo exactly what Benny said and add to that. Better employees will provide better services to the people, and that's what we're all about.
Absolutely.
That's what we're all about. The governing authority provides services to the people. And when you have good employees who are doing their job and happy doing what they're doing, you're going to see an improvement in the services to the people.
You really will, and in our experience with various parishes, as somebody asked earlier, interestingly enough, the ones who have the highest standards reward people well, who are doing a good job, try and train, coach, work with people who maybe are not doing as well over a period of time. It may take a few cycles, but the people who don't want to be good and don't want to work, they know they're going to be asked to work hard to serve the public, do their jobs. They choose to be employed somewhere else, and you end up really seeing the entire performance go up, and that is what you hear reflected when developers come to town and they talk about, well, it's easy to work with this parish, or, I want to put my project there, or You know, this is a good place to, you know, you have to interact with government. They can tell the difference. So you're absolutely right. I think, and I wrote down the goal. I think that was very helpful, so thank you all for helping to shape that. That's very, very helpful.
Okay, just to kind of clarify the motion, Ms. Terry, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, so we want to send this directly to the council. We may have to, because of the timing involved with it, but we also, once that's done, we may have to send something back. I'm not sure where we're at in the budget with this, but we may have to do something. Ken, you need to look at that we may have to bring back for final approval through finance or whatever, or may need to include that in at the council level initially on this. So, with that being said, we have a motion to move this to the full council with approval.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion passes. I want to thank everybody. It was a lengthy discussion, a lot of good conversation we had here this evening. Thank y'all for coming. We'll move on to agenda item number 6.
Motion to adjourn. Mr.
Motion to
Second.
adjourn. Second, any objection? We are adjourned.